For months, Carlos noticed the same hungry child eating alone, wearing the same torn clothes every day. So he started leaving food in the boy's desk. He thought he was just helping a poor kid, until he learned the shocking truth about Tommy's real identity. My name is Maria Santos, and I'm the principal of Lincoln Elementary School. This is the story of how our janitor's simple act of kindness revealed a truth that changed everything we thought we knew about compassion, sacrifice, and the power of paying attention to those who need us most. Carlos Rodriguez had been our night janitor for 8 years. He was quiet, hardworking, and had a gentle way with the children who occasionally stayed late for after-school programs. The kids loved him. He knew all their names, remembered their birthdays, and always had a kind word for anyone who seemed sad or troubled. Carlos himself had very little. He worked 2 jobs to support his elderly mother and send money to his sister's family in Mexico. He lived in a small apartment, drove a 20-year-old car, and I knew he sometimes skipped meals to make sure his family had enough. Despite his own struggles, Carlos had the biggest heart of anyone I'd ever met. The story begins in September, when 8-year-old Tommy Chen started attending our school. Tommy was different from the other children, not because of his mixed heritage, but because of his circumstances. While other kids came to school with backpacks full of supplies and lunchboxes packed with sandwiches and snacks, Tommy arrived each day with nothing. He wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, all of them too small and showing signs of wear. His shoes had holes that he tried to hide by walking carefully to avoid puddles. During lunch, Tommy would sit alone while other children ate their meals. When teachers asked about his lunch, he would quietly say he wasn't hungry or that he'd forgotten it at home. The school provided free lunch for qualifying students, but Tommy's family had never filled out the paperwork. Despite multiple attempts to contact his guardian, listed as his grandmother, we never received a response. Tommy was failing academically, not because he lacked intelligence, but because it's hard to concentrate on learning when you're hungry. His teacher, Mrs. Peterson, had tried keeping snacks in her classroom, but Tommy was too proud to accept them in front of other children. Carlos noticed Tommy immediately. As the night janitor, Carlos arrived at school each evening after most staff had gone home, but he made a point of staying late enough to see the children who were picked up from after-school care. That's when he first saw Tommy. The boy would wait by the front window every day until 6 p.m. when his grandmother would arrive in an old sedan to pick him up. During those waiting hours, Tommy would sit quietly in the main hallway, never asking for anything, never complaining, just patiently waiting. Carlos began to recognize the signs he knew too well from his own childhood. The way Tommy held his stomach when he thought no one was looking. The careful way he rationed any small snack he occasionally received. The tired look in his eyes that comes from not getting enough nutrition. "That boy, he's hungry," Carlos told me one evening when I was working late. "Every day he's hungry." "We've tried to help," I explained, "but we can't reach his family to set up free lunch, and he won't accept food from teachers." Carlos nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes pride makes it hard to accept help, even when you need it most. The next morning, something magical began happening. Tommy arrived at school to find a brown paper bag tucked discreetly inside his desk. Inside was a simple but nutritious meal: a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, a small bag of crackers, and a juice box. There was no note, no explanation, just food. Tommy looked around the classroom, trying to figure out where it had come from. Finding no answers, he quietly ate the meal, his first real breakfast in weeks. This continued every single school day for 3 months. Carlos would arrive at school early, before even the teachers got there, and leave a simple meal in Tommy's desk. He was careful to vary the contents, sometimes a turkey sandwich, sometimes crackers and cheese, always an apple or banana, always something to drink. Carlos spent nearly $30 a week on these meals, money he definitely didn't have to spare. He cut back on his own groceries, skipped his usual coffee, and found creative ways to stretch his budget. But seeing Tommy's face light up each morning when he found the food made every sacrifice worthwhile. Tommy began to transform. His grades improved dramatically as his ability to concentrate returned. He started participating in class discussions, smiling more often, and even began making friends with other children. Mrs. Peterson noticed the change immediately. "It's like Tommy became a completely different child," she told me. "He's engaged, happy, and performing at grade level now." What we didn't know was that Tommy had his own secret. While we assumed he was just another child from a struggling family, Tommy's reality was far more complex. His grandmother, Mrs. Chen, was actually a retired federal judge who had been caring for Tommy since his parents died in a car accident 2 years earlier. Mrs. Chen was proud, independent, and came from a generation that believed in handling problems privately. She had been struggling financially since retirement, too proud to ask for help, and had been trying to provide for Tommy while dealing with her own health issues and mounting medical bills. The torn clothes and lack of lunch money weren't because Mrs. Chen didn't love Tommy. They were because she was spending her limited resources on things she considered more important, like Tommy's medical checkups and ensuring he had a stable home environment. Mrs. Chen had been meaning to fill out the free lunch paperwork but kept putting it off, embarrassed by the idea of accepting charity. Meanwhile, Tommy suffered in silence, not wanting to worry his grandmother by telling her he was hungry at school. The truth came out in December, 3 months after Carlos had started his secret food delivery program. Mrs. Chen had been feeling guilty about Tommy's situation and decided to observe him at school to see how he was doing. She parked across from the school during lunchtime, expecting to see her grandson eating alone or looking hungry. Instead, she watched through the cafeteria windows as Tommy sat with a group of friends, happily eating a packed lunch and participating in animated conversations with his classmates. Mrs. Chen was confused. She hadn't packed Tommy a lunch, and she hadn't signed him up for the school meal program. Where was the food coming from? The next morning, Mrs. Chen arrived at school an hour early and hid in her car, watching the building. At 6:30 a.m., she saw Carlos arrive with a small grocery bag and enter the school through the janitor's entrance. Curious and concerned, Mrs. Chen went to the main office when it opened and asked to speak with me. "Principal Santos," she said, "I need to know who has been feeding my grandson." I was confused. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen, but I'm not sure what you mean." "Someone has been leaving food in Tommy's desk every day for months. I want to know who it is and why." My heart sank. Had someone been bothering Tommy? Was this some kind of prank or, worse, inappropriate contact with a child? "Let me look into this immediately," I told her. I called Carlos to my office that afternoon, fearing I might have to investigate some kind of misconduct. "Carlos, I need to ask you about something. Have you been leaving food in Tommy Chen's desk?" Carlos's face went pale. "Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have, but that boy was so hungry every day and I thought..." "Carlos, it's okay. I'm not angry. I just need to understand. Why didn't you come to me or his teacher?" "Because sometimes when adults get involved, it becomes complicated. The boy needed food. I had food to give. It seemed simple." "Mrs. Chen wants to meet with you." Carlos looked terrified. Am I in trouble? I only wanted to help. The meeting the next morning was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Mrs. Chen arrived at 7 a.m., accompanied by 2 men in expensive suits whom she introduced as her former law clerks, now successful attorneys who still sought her counsel on important cases. Carlos entered my office looking nervous and humble in his work clothes, carrying his janitor's keys and clearly intimidated by the formal setting. Mrs. Chen stood up when he entered the room. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, her voice shaking with emotion, "I understand you've been feeding my grandson for 3 months." "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just saw that he was hungry, and I remember being hungry when I was his age. I thought maybe..." Mrs. Chen held up her hand to stop him, then did something that surprised everyone in the room. She bowed deeply to Carlos. "Mr. Rodriguez, you have done something I failed to do. You took care of my grandson when I was too proud to ask for help." Carlos looked confused. "Ma'am, I don't understand." "Tommy's parents died 2 years ago, and I've been raising him on a fixed income. I've been struggling to provide for him while dealing with my own health issues and pride. I saw that he needed help, but I kept putting off asking for it." She gestured to the 2 men in suits. "These gentlemen work for the Chen Family Foundation, which my late husband established. We help families in need, but I was too stubborn to help my own grandson properly." One of the attorneys stepped forward. "Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Chen would like to offer you a position with the foundation. We need someone who understands real need and responds with genuine compassion." Carlos looked stunned. "I don't understand." Mrs. Chen smiled through her tears. "Tommy told me that every morning he would find food in his desk, and he started calling it angel food because he didn't know where it came from. You've been his guardian angel for 3 months." "But I'm just a janitor," Carlos said quietly. You're a man who saw a hungry child and fed him without asking for recognition or reward, Mrs. Chen replied. That's exactly the kind of person we need to identify families who need help. The position came with a significant salary increase, full benefits, and the opportunity for Carlos to help coordinate assistance for struggling families throughout our school district. But Mrs. Chen wasn't finished. Mr. Rodriguez, I also want to establish a fund in your name, the Carlos Rodriguez Kindness Fund, to ensure that no child in this school district goes hungry. The two attorneys explained that the fund would provide discreet assistance to families in need, coordinate with schools to identify children who needed help, and create programs to address childhood hunger throughout the community. Carlos was overwhelmed. Mrs. Chen, I don't need recognition. I just wanted to help Tommy. And because you helped Tommy without seeking anything in return, you've shown us what real compassion looks like. The story doesn't end there. Carlos accepted the position with the foundation, but he insisted on continuing to work part-time at our school. These kids know me, he said. I don't want to abandon them. Tommy thrived academically and emotionally, eventually graduating as valedictorian of his 8th grade class. In his speech, he talked about the anonymous angel who had fed him during his darkest period and taught him that kindness doesn't always come with explanations or expectations. The Carlos Rodriguez Kindness Fund has since helped over 500 families in our district. Carlos travels to schools throughout the region, training staff to identify children who need help and coordinating assistance programs. But perhaps most importantly, Carlos's story spread throughout our community and beyond. Other janitors and support staff began paying closer attention to children who might need help. Teachers started looking for signs of hunger or neglect they might have missed before. Mrs. Chen became one of Carlos's closest friends and biggest supporters. Despite their different backgrounds and social positions, they bonded over their shared love for Tommy and their commitment to helping other children. Carlos taught me that pride should never come before a child's welfare, Mrs. Chen often says. Sometimes the people with the least give the most. Carlos still arrives at school early most mornings, though now it's in his capacity as community liaison for the foundation. But old habits die hard. Teachers still occasionally find small snacks left discreetly for children who seem to need them. Some things don't change, Carlos told me recently. If I see a hungry child, I'm going to find a way to feed them. When asked about his transformation from janitor to foundation director, Carlos always gives the same answer. I didn't change. The opportunity to help more children changed, but the heart that wants to help, that's the same. Tommy, now in high school, volunteers with the foundation during summers and school breaks. He's planning to study social work in college and wants to continue the cycle of helping children in need. Carlos showed me that kindness doesn't have to be complicated, Tommy says. Sometimes it's just about seeing someone who needs help and doing something about it. The brown paper bags that once appeared mysteriously in Tommy's desk have been replaced by a comprehensive program that feeds dozens of children every day. But the spirit behind those original anonymous meals, the quiet, expectation-free compassion of one person who saw a need and filled it, remains the foundation of everything the program does. Carlos Rodriguez started as a man who cleaned our school at night and noticed a hungry child. He became a community leader, a foundation director, and proof that the most powerful change often begins with the smallest act of kindness. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they carry lunch bags and mop buckets, and they change the world one hungry child at a time. The two men in suits who came looking for Carlos that day weren't there to investigate or intimidate. They were there to recognize and elevate someone who had been quietly changing lives without asking for anything in return. Because sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places, doing extraordinary things when no one is watching. And sometimes all it takes is someone with a good heart and a brown paper bag to change everything.